So welcome everyone. Thank you for having us here today. We're excited to talk to you about our project, which is the search hedge for Hispanic/Latinx U.S. populations. So as part of this series, we're hoping that you can advance your search skills and support your scholarly activities by learning to understand how to use the search hedge we developed, and then also how to utilize the search hedge for your own practice. So before we get started, we just wanted to take a quick minute to acknowledge that the project's aim was to review previous and current medical subject headings that are biased, culturally offensive, and/or outdated in order to make recommendations to the National Library of Medicine, and then also to develop the search hedge, which we're talking about today, to help researchers more effectively locate health information for US-based Hispanic/Latinx populations. So the framework used for this project is based on cultural humility, which aims at being respectful of differences and recognizing that terms can change. The project team looked at a variety of inclusive terminologies for Hispanic/Latinx populations and found that Latinx is frequently used within the health literature. However, the project leads and many of our members, many of whom are Hispanic/Latinx descent, with different cultural identities, recognize that while Latinx aims to be a gender inclusive, many are still divided about its use. So the project team welcomes different opinions and contributions to the discussion. Okay, Stephanie, go ahead and you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. My name is Stephanie Roth. I'm one of the co-leads for the Search Hedge project team with Rebecca, and I'm also the Biomedical and Research Services Librarian at the Ginsberg Health Sciences Library at Temple University. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a mixed race, Puerto Rican cisgender woman that uses the terms Hispanic, Latina, or Latinx, and I work as an academic librarian at an R1 institution.
Great. And my name is Rebecca Orozco. I'm multicultural. I'm Mexican American and white. I'm a cisgender woman that prefers the term Mexican American, but I also use Hispanic, Latina, depending on the context. I work at an academic R1 institution as well. I am actually a science librarian at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And so my colleagues who are medical librarians were gracious enough to let me be on their team. Okay, so just to give you some background and context for our project, the Latinx Hispanic/Latinx Search Hedge project was part of a larger initiative within the Medical Library Association Latinx Caucus. So here you can see the mission of the MLA Latinx Caucus. The project focuses on the part of the mission that's to promote programs addressing health issues unique to Hispanic/Latinx communities. This project advocated for Latinx members to encourage participation by anyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, that supported these endeavors. So in the case of this project, it included members outside of MLA and the Latinx Caucus, and they brought diverse perspectives, expertise, and guidance. And we have a couple links in the chat if you want to learn more about the Latinx Caucus or MLA. Okay, so like I said, this was part of a larger project called Hispanic Latinx Inclusive Terminologies Project, and this was a collaboration that brought together 16 individuals across academic disciplines and library specialties, working in a variety of time zones. So we kind of chatted about time zones before we got started today, so that was kind of fun to try and coordinate everyone. We had 2 independent teams, as you can see here. So today we're going to focus on the search hedge, which is this team, but we also had a team that focused on medical subject headings. So our team built a comprehensive search hedge that captures Hispanic/Latinx and Spanish-speaking populations in the United States terms for those populations, while the MESH project team examined the medical subject headings vocabulary related to Hispanic and Latinx populations and made recommendations to include into MESH vocabulary and also entry terms. So here are the members of the two teams, and we thought it was important to share with you who contributed to both projects. So you can see that Stephanie and I are the co-leads for the Search Hedge project. We also have our contributors of Myra, Rosie, Laurel, and Maureen. And then we had subject matter experts. So ours were Melanie Lackey and Cynthia Locker, who helped us develop our search hedge. So hopefully we could validate it. Okay, so now we're going to dive in more specifically into the search hedge. So the project aim was to create a set of functional search hedges based on the availability of Hispanic and Latinx natural language and also medical subject terms. So just a broad timeline. So we unofficially, we kind of started in September. Stephanie actually drafted the first iteration of the search hedge, but we officially started in October of 2020, where we dove in as a team to develop the search hedge. So we discussed natural language. We also discussed mesh terms, and then we tested them in the database PubMed. In June of 2021, we completed our creation of our PubMed search hedge. Each team member translated that search hedge into other databases in Google Scholar. Stephanie will give you some more information about that. And then by August 2021, we were peer reviewing all of our search hedge translations. And in September of 2021, we deposited our search and associated translations into the Temple's institutional repository, which is called TUScholarShare. So as part of our process, we, in developing the hedge, we reviewed the draft, like I mentioned before, and then we had these different iterations that you can see here on the screen. All of these iterations are archived, but ultimately we decided that we were going to combine all of them to have a Hispanic/Latinx search hedge. We felt like this would make it more manageable for people to actually use. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie and let her talk more about that.
Thanks, Becca. I'm now going to talk about what happened after we did the first draft of the PubMed search. Rebecca and I met and we term tested a lot of the keywords and mesh terms to see what the results were, how many results they were retrieving by term. And this is just a snapshot on the screen of some of the terms that we tested, but it doesn't include all of them. And then it shows the percentage of times they appeared in the search. But that wasn't the only indicator we were looking at, not just how many times it was retrieving, that word was picking up articles, but we were also looking at the results themselves, and we scanned the results, the first few pages of results set to best match, and just we're trying to see if they were related to the US population combined with the Latinx Hispanic terms, and if the articles were relevant. Then we made a decision with those two things combined, and then we presented our findings to the rest of our team. And we decided, looking at that information, that we wanted to narrow the search to more country-focused or to more people-focused terms instead of the country-focused terms. So we were focusing in on terms like Brazilian or Bolivian, and then we didn't include terms for the countries like Bolivia or Brazil. Next slide. These are other key decisions that we made as a team in order to get the project completed in a year timeline. We wanted to make sure we weren't getting stuck in the process. So we started out with many different search hedges, and then we had terms that we were confused about. So we ended up just limiting the search to the broader US Latinx Hispanic population. And then we excluded terms that were problematic or had racist origins. We also decided for this search not to include the indigenous populations because we felt that could be done in a future search. And then we can move forward with this broader search strategy. This hedge also used a modified filter. It's a US filter from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And we have cited that filter in the final search strategies that are shared. That filter for the United States could be removed if you want to search Hispanic Latinx more broadly. But just keep in mind, we removed those country terms, so that's something you may want to add back in. Our next slide. And this is the final version of the PubMed search strategy. We recently updated the search strategy on this slide, so you're getting the most current strategy. We're in the process of submitting a revision because one of the mesh terms had changed from the time we submitted the search strategy and from the time of presenting today. That we think is a result from all the great work that our mesh team did. That was the other project that was going on in coordination with the Search Hedge project. So if you download the search strategies today from our institutional repository, they aren't the most accurate. So use the one that's on the slides here. I put in a request, so that should be changed very soon. Something else that I just want to point out is you can see on this slide the division between the Latinx Hispanic terms at the top and then the United States terms at the bottom. And that's the part that I said you could remove if you wanted to. We also added some other databases that we weren't initially considering. And one of those was the Cochrane Library, looking at the Cochrane Trials database of the Cochrane Library, because we thought it would be good for people that are doing systematic reviews. Next slide. And this is the databases that we searched. We searched a total of 13 databases. So the initial PubMed strategy plus translating that to 12 databases. And we did a similar translation to the original PubMed search, and we only changed out syntax and subject heading terms to make sure that they matched each database. So similar to the process of translating a search strategy for a systematic review. So the databases we ended up searching are included in the search strategy and Hedge, if you download it, are PubMed, Embase, Medline, Cochrane Central, CINAHL, Dentistry and Oral Sciences Source, Google Scholar, 2 versions of PsycInfo in the ProQuest and EBSCOhost platforms, Scopus, Web of Science, ERIC, and then the last one is Lilacs. Next slide. Once the translations were completed, our team then peer reviewed each search strategy, which is also part of the new Prisma S guidelines to include a peer review process. Those are intended for systematic reviews, but we thought it would be good to follow that since these search hedges could be used for a systematic review search. And this, on the slides, you'll see just a sample of the first 1 to 3 items that are included as part of that press checklist. We use the press checklist to peer review the search strategies. So that's a good resource if you are including a peer review. On the left side, you'll see just a sample of the template that our team filled out, where we had to write down what database we were peer reviewing, the name of the reviewer, any comments that the peer reviewer made based on the press checklist, and then the date the suggestions were completed and the searches were finalized by the original searcher for that assigned database. So our team had about 1 to 2 months, 1 month to peer review their assigned search strategies. Each person had about 2 to 3 to peer review, and then another month of turnaround for the team members to make changes based on the peer review that they received. Next slide. So the full search hedge is available in Temple University's TUScholarShare, and we'll be able to put that link in the chat for you too. So that's where you can find it. It's also listed in the ISSG filters, which is a great resource for finding filters and search hedges. And our team is currently working to, there's a subset of our original team that has convened and is working to validate the original PubMed search strategy from the Search Hedge project. So that will be coming out soon. And we may be making some updates or changes in the future. And as the mesh terminology changes, we may be making more updates to the search. Next slide. Now we're going to spend some time to show you how to apply the search hedge to a research question. And it's important to start with the focus research question to get the best search results. So you can use the PICO format, dividing your search into the patient or population, intervention or exposure, the comparison if there is one, and then the outcome. So I took our search and added it in as our population. So our US Hispanic Latinx population, we're looking at all ages for our population part of the PICO. Then our intervention is going to be peer support. And then the outcome is going to be the impact on care of those with the IDD, intellectual or developmental disability. Next slide. Once you have your question, you can combine your search concepts. Each concept would need to be expanded by additional keywords and subject headings. To save time for this presentation today, I'm going to use search hedges that were already developed by librarians. The first is a US Hispanic Latinx search, which was part of our project. And then the other is a search that I created at Temple University for researchers and is deposited in TUScholarShare as well. And that's peer support and IDD, peer support and IDD search. Next slide. So now in the PubMed database, we're going to drop in the Hispanic Latinx search strategy. And we're going to show you how to combine that with the search hedge for the peer support IDD that's already been created. So in the advanced search mode is where you can combine both of those search hedges. And we're just going to combine that with and. So we're going to take both, add each one to the query box, and then use the Boolean operator and then search. Now we have 14 results, articles that are focused on the PICO question. You can also decide to filter if you have inclusion criteria, filter by date, a date range, and you can build another filter for one of your inclusion criteria. If you wanted to filter it by age, you can also do that as well. But whenever using a filter that someone else designed, it's important to give credit and cite that in your paper if you're using it for publication, just as we did when we borrowed the United States population filter, we gave credit to the original source. So if you use any of these search hedges today, we've included on one of the final slides the citations for those filters. Next slide. So I mentioned the Prisma S. This is a guideline for systematic review reporting. It is used by those who are already following the Prisma and the new Prisma 2020 for their systematic review. It's important to save your searches properly and document them well, especially if you are doing a systematic review. Next slide. And this is the Prisma S checklist. There's also a coordinating document and paper that goes over each step in greater detail and gives examples of how to report. You must make sure that you are going through each item on the checklist and that every item is well documented and reproducible. So these are really helpful guidelines for any search, not just a systematic review search, but any search that you wish to make reproducible. And you'll also see that peer review is one of the things on the checklist. So by doing the peer review, we were following the Prisma S. Another thing is making sure to document database platforms. When saying we search PubMed or Embase, we're also documenting those platforms. So we're saying PubMed through the National Library of Medicine, which is the free version of PubMed, and then Embase using the Elsevier platform, or Web of Science using Clarivate Analytics. So just making sure you're documenting that. Also making sure you're documenting the dates of the search, the last day you ran the search. And then if you made any updates to your search, how did you go about doing the update and making sure that that process is reproducible as well. You can see the full checklist by visiting the Prisma website and then looking at the Prisma S extension. We thank you for inviting us to present on the Hispanic Latinx Inclusive Terminologies Project and specifically on our search hedge. Our contact information is on this slide, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. These are our credits next slide. These are our credits and links to the full search hedge strategies that we used in today's demonstration. And next slide will now open it up for any questions.